Necron Warriors are one of those units where when the previews and the leaks for 10th edition started coming in, I think a lot of people were rather dubious about them and thought maybe they'd lost a lot more than they had gained. They had a worse ballistic skill, and with the changes to how reanimation worked, everyone just thought they weren't going to be particularly good, I think. But I'm going to be honest, I do think they have a lot going for them, so today let us take a look at the humble Necron Warrior and decide if they're going to be any good as we go into 10th edition. So the Necron Warrior comes in at 12 points a model and can be taken either as a 10 or a 20 man squad, so it is either 120 or 240 points, and for that you get nothing stellar, it has to be said. It's not a terrible stat line, but it's fairly generic and pretty dull. They are toughness 4, they have a 4-up save, they are 1 wound, they've got a fairly bad movement of only 5 inches and a rather underwhelming leadership of 7+. So let's be honest, there isn't a lot to love here. As I said, they're okay, but for 12 points a model, they're hardly blowing you away. On the weapons front, they are equally okay, with their main use being at range. They've got nothing to write home about on the melee front, but in range they either have the Gorse Flayer, which is rapid fire 1, strength 4 with lethal hits, or the deadlier but shorter ranged Reaper, which is strength 5 and -1 AP, as well as being 2 shots with lethal hits, but only at 12 inches. They have lost assault, so you do lose movement with them now. You can't just advance up and keep shooting, so it will be a little bit slower. It will take you an extra turn to get the Reaper into range, but I do think in general it is probably better. Unless you know for 100% fact you are keeping a squad of 10 warriors on a backfield objective just to plink shots off as they hold an objective for you, I think generally by turn 2 or 3 with the Reaper you will probably be outperforming the Flayer in terms of damage that you do. The lethal hits on both are a nice little extra, but in general, even against a toughness 4 3-up save model, the Flayer is in rapid fire range from 10 warriors, still only averaging about 2 damage, so killing 1 marine, whilst the Reaper does a little bit better, doing around 3.3 damage, so killing 1.5 marines. So I mean, neither of them are particularly scary or going to do a huge amount of damage, especially not for that 120 point price tag. Where the warriors really do come into their own and what does make them so good is of course the army rules and the way they interact with that. They do have reanimation protocols, so you'll be getting D3 models back in your command phase, and in particular for their warriors, they have an improved version of this in their number is Legion, and what this does is it gives them D6 wounds back instead of D3, and if they are within range of an objective, that gets a bump to D3 plus 3 wounds back instead. So now, in each of your command phases, you can be getting up to 6 Necron Warriors back, which is potentially 70 odd points of models back each battle round, which for a unit you may want to either sit back on a home objective or move up into the midfield and grab a midfield objective is really good. It's very good for an objective holding unit, and a big 20-man squad of Necron Warriors will be really tough to push off an objective, or really tough if you're going to use them as a tar pit. It's a fairly expensive tar pit, but you could potentially use them as a tar pit to hold up big scary enemies that maybe don't have enough attacks to get past the fact that you can be getting 6 warriors back each command phase. So, I mean, yes, these guys may not be the flashiest in terms of their stat line, they are not the killiest, they are not the fastest thing on the table, but they are, even with just 1 wound and a 4-up save, absolutely one of the potentially most long-lasting units that you can put down on the table at the moment. They also get exponentially better when you bring in other buffs and abilities that they can take advantage of. In squads of 20 especially, they are fantastic recipients for the various lords and HQs that the Necrons have access to, and a few particular standouts are things like Overlords, who not only boost the warriors' hit rolls thanks to the command protocols rule, but they also let warriors resurrect in each command phase thanks to their reanimation orb, which means of course that you can potentially be getting back 70 points worth of model twice in a battle round, which means they really will not go anywhere unless your opponent pours an absolutely huge amount of firepower into them. The cryptex that the Necrons have access to are equally as handy, and they can be attached to a unit even if a noble has already been attached to it, something like an overlord, so you can double stack some buffs which make the warriors even more potent. And with things like the Technomancer, you can give your warriors a 5-up Feel No Pain, which gives them a very welcome extra layer of protection over their relatively mediocre 4-up armor save. And then the Chronomancer is another very good pick, giving another great defensive buff with -1 for the unit to be hit. So again, making them so much harder to take down, especially if they are somehow getting the benefits of cover as well. The Chronomancer also provides a really nice utility buff in the Chronometron rule, which lets his unit, after they've shot, as long as they're not in engagement range of anything, make a normal move of up to 5 inches. So that essentially doubles your warrior's movement, and you can get your squad of warriors moving 10 inches across the board if you need them to, which is a huge boost to them. Really does make up for one of their key weaknesses, which is that relatively slow 5-inch move. If you wanted to get a bit more damage output from the warriors instead, the Plasmancer brings the Harbinger of Destruction rule, which grants critical hits on a 5+, so all those lethal hits from your guns will now be going off on 5s rather than 6s, which is a nice boost when you combine it with the +1 to hit from something like a Lord or an Overlord. You can actually do a, not amazing, but certainly a much better amount of damage to enemy units if you give them that more offensive buffing. I do think in general though, I would probably take a big 20-man blob, put in an Overlord and a Chronomancer, giving them a much greater amount of mobility, some improved damage thanks to the Overlord's +1 to hit anyway, but then in terms of defense, you are giving them that -1 to be hit and that double reanimation thanks to the orb. And that is a unit that, even against like 100 bolter shots, will only lose around 12 warriors, which can of course then potentially come back in both your and your opponent's command phases. So you could in theory get all of those 12 models back at the start of the next battle round, which is insanely good durability for a unit that you kind of just want to be soaking up enemy fire. On top of that, Necron Warriors are quite good recipients for a few of the Necron Stratagems, which across the board are all pretty good, to be honest. Things like the Protocol of the Conquering Tyrant give full wound rerolls to a unit, and at full range if you have a character in the unit. So when you are shooting, not only are you getting that +1 to hit from the Overlord, but you are getting reroll wounds, which again, it's not going to make them the killiest thing on the battlefield, but it is going to make them much more of a threat. And with Reapers, they could be a genuinely scary unit to anything that is toughness 4, so the strength 5 is going to be wounding on 3s, and maybe has a 3 or a 4-up armor save, so that's -1 is going to make a big difference to their saving roll. Protocol of the Undying Legions is done in your opponent's shooting or fight phase just after the enemy has attacked with the unit, and when you use this, it means that you can activate your Reanimation Protocol straight away. So even if you've lost a few warriors, but you know that some more attacks are coming in from another unit that's going to shoot into you, or another unit that's in combat, you can use this and help your unit to weather the storm a bit and just get a few models back before that second round of attacks comes in. So with this, you can, in theory, get Reanimation Protocols going off 3 times in a battle round. On top of that, they also get some fairly nice boosts from units like the Reanimator, whose Reanimation Beam can target a unit within 12 inches and they regain an extra D3 models back, or D3 wounds back, with their reanimation. So now you could potentially be getting back 2d3 plus 3 models in each command phase if they're near an objective to your unit of 20 warriors, which is on average about 170 points back each battle round. So there is just a huge amount of durability baked into the warriors if you look for it. Like, their base profile doesn't look anything impressive, but there are so many ways you can buff them and boost them and kind of bring various things together to make them unbelievably tanky. And I mean, yes, it is a bit of an investment. The 20 warriors, an overlord, a chronomancer, and the reanimator will set you back around 470 points. So yes, it is a lot to put into one sort of big unit and accompanying reanimator. But if you want that unit to just march up the board, lock down no man's land, and just be almost impossible for your opponent to remove, they're going to do that job really well. They are going to be tough for your enemy to get rid of unless they dedicate all of their firepower into doing it. So for 470 points, they can be a really solid way of just soaking up enemy firepower, or just forcing your opponent to think, I'm just going to have to give up on that objective because I know I'm never going to be able to chew through all of those warriors faster than they can bring them back. And so, I mean, in general, they are just a really, really good unit for sitting on objectives and just not being able to be removed from them. They are straightforward, they are a fairly simple datasheet, and from a damage perspective, they're not super scary unless you really buff them in that way. But Necron Warriors in a big squad with the right support may well be one of the tankiest units that can actually grace the battlefields of 10th edition so far. So that is going to be it for the Necron Warriors. I am a big fan. I think they are somewhat underrated at the moment, and there are other things that can compete with them. The Immortals are tankier in terms of a base profile, and they can still get those buffs from things like the Overlord and Cryptex, so you could argue that maybe they aren't quite as good as the Immortals, giving them the same buffs, but the fact that you can get more models back means the Warriors can just keep on trucking turn after turn after turn, and they can just sit on an objective, especially when stuff starts dying from both sides, so the overall damage output from both sides is slowly going down and down. It's going to mean that taking out 20 warriors in one turn before you get to reanimate them again is going to just be almost impossible by the time you get to turn 3 or 4 or 5, so they can just sit there and claim those victory points for you without anything being able to stop them. So for me, I'm a huge fan of them, and I think they are almost a staple, at least one big squad with some characters inside it, in almost every Necron list at the moment. But as always, what do you make of the Humble Warrior? And are there any other combos that you can think of that may make them even more valuable to a Necron player? Let me know your thoughts and ideas and theories down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.